Now, that requires us, nobody's better at these numbers probably than Judge Moore over here, so he's probably editing everything I'm saying. Is that right, Judge? I'm doing okay so far? Well, when I looked at this earlier, I thought there's a whole lot of numbers in here, but these are numbers, people, so it'll be okay. But that match that we're required represents about $200 million for the federal formula funding and another $20 million for the federal bridge program funding. So that means we're not out of the woods. We've got to come up with our own funds. We've still got to come up with our own funds. Over the next 5 years, too, we can compete for the many discretionary grants included in the bill. Now, in the Cabinet's proposal, in the governor's proposed highway plan, which I've got a copy of right here, 1,500 projects or so. But in that plan, it contemplates the winning of some of these federal grants. We think that was the appropriate thing to do, the wise thing to do, the responsible thing to do. We know that we can be and we should be competitive. I was glad to hear that Stephanie Pollock, the Deputy Administrator for Federal Highways, mentioned that we've been talking already about the grant programs, how they can be petitioned for, sought after, as well as not just for a Brent Spence Bridge project, but for local projects as well. These are where the RAISE grants, infra, others are appropriate. So over the next 5 years, we can expect to be competitive in many of these discretionary grants. So let me talk a little bit about what's good news. We have to recognize, too, that there's going to be intense competition for these grant programs. And that's why the governor put $250 million in the budget from the general fund to help us be competitive. We found out last year, for example, that we were not as competitive as our competitor states on some of the grants because they had upped the ante above the 20% normal routine matching requirements. So the governor said it, I think, best yesterday when he said, nothing's a slam dunk these days. We know that we have to put every effort forward, including additional funding, in order to win these grants. We'll have to compete and compete hard for the federal funding needed for the toll-free solution, of course, for the Brent Spence. We know that. Governor Beshear likes to say we need to be bold both in our vision and in our action. The governor's been bold in proposing that $250 million from the general fund to supplement the matching funds we can offer in a grant application. We will need to be strategic in our applications as well. We will need to coordinate with partners. That is to say, for example, with Brent Spence, coordinate with Ohio Department of Transportation, which we're doing routinely every day. Gary Valentine, sitting right over here, our project manager for that project, seasoned as anybody I've ever met in executing a project like this. And Gary is working day in, day out with his people. Stacy's working on it as well. And they're working with the Ohio Department of Transportation folks. So we will have a competitive position going forward, a team, and illustrating that we do have the teamwork. I think that's the way to say it, don't you think, Gary? We've got a team that's put together, that's hitting the ground running. That's true, too, of the I-69 projects that are the new bridges. The Brent Spence, both the Brent Spence and the I-69 projects aren't replacement bridges. We need to remember that, too. So many people, don't they, Bob? So many people still think that we're going to be taking down the Brent Spence, or we're taking down, it's the I-41? US 41. US 41, right, Barry? I thought so. Yeah. There's a lot of numbers and a lot of bridges, y'all. So that's what remembering that is important. So whatever the rules for the grant programs turn out to be, the governor has made it clear that he will fight for every available federal dollar. And I can assure you all from dealing with him routinely on a day-to-day basis that is exactly what we are doing. So I think I've run to the closing moments. The senator may or may not be here yet. He's not here yet. Yeah, Ryan suggested any questions. I'll be happy to do that. If I can handle them, I'll get back to you. All right? We're going, surely somebody. All right, Mark Day. I was warned that you might ask a question. No, that's all right. I made that up. I really did, Mark. Oh, okay. How about a softball? Okay, that works. Aha, yes, sir. Yes. How about commercial aviation? How about aviation? Well, I think the governor's budget was really commendable in terms of its assigning $50 million for. I know that's for general aviation, and I know that that's not particularly in your wheelhouse, Mark, but sort of, yeah, it is sort of, kind of, right. Absolutely. You've got quite a presence with general aviation, of course. We've got the electric vehicles, of course. Of course, that is highways, but aviation and represents a real opportunity, of course, especially for our larger commercial airports, as you know. So the IIJA represents real opportunities there. Represents incredible opportunities for broadband and for taking broadband to areas of our state that have not really received it yet. So remarkable opportunities there as well. And I'm probably forgetting. Have we got water and sewer in IIJA? I know I'm working at water and sewer. We do have water and sewer in IIJA as well, right, in bipartisan infrastructure law. We're also working it, of course, with ARPA funding. And those projects we're now expecting to have all 120 counties covered with the water and wastewater project. That was just announced this week. The governor announced that this week, and so we're fortunate there. We've gotten some challenges on the broadband. That's not unexpected. So it's working through the process. Anybody else? I can pretend like I'm an auctioneer then, say going. Uh-oh, here we go.
On.
Yeah.
Just a quick thank you for you and your entire staff, all the way down to the salt truck drivers and the office staff. We just couldn't do it without you guys. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad that you said that, because these last few weeks after the tornado and then the snow and ice events, really again represent that operational backbone that I was speaking about. On the night of January the 6th, I think it was. Was it the 6th? Sometimes those days go together on me. Was it the 6th? Denitra? It was the 6th, right? Yeah, you remember well. Yeah, that was the night. I was trying to remember how long it's been since I did not sleep any in a night. And that night, I did not sleep at all. And I'm sure that our chiefs didn't sleep at all. And those who were, I shouldn't be talking about myself. I should be talking about those who are on the front lines, just like you said, those who were out all night long working these roads. 1,300 pieces of equipment, more than I would estimate. You all help me. How far off would I be wrong if I said that in the period of 3 days in that event that we had all 3,400 people in the Department of Highways some way or another engaged? Matt, is that close to fair statement? 80%? I said engaged. That doesn't mean on the front line necessarily, but somehow or another involved in the project. Jason, what do you think? 80%. Yeah, 80%. So 80% of 3,400. Well, y'all can do the math. There's a lot of engineers in here. Okay, well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. It's been a real honor for me to be able to work with such professionals that are represented throughout this room and throughout the industry that serves transportation across the bat. So, Jennifer, and thank you all again for having this conference. Yeah.
Thank you, Secretary Gray. It's always a pleasure. I really enjoy working with you. I just wanted to let you know we have an update from McConnell's folks, and they're about 2 minutes out. So if y'all don't mind, just wait. And as soon as he comes in, he'll come right up, and we'll. Oh, he's on his way up currently. So we'll get started here in just a minute.
All right. Leader McConnell is coming into the building, and okay. Well, I'm Mark Polston with WSP. Really an honor at this time to introduce Leader Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is the United States Senate Republican leader. He is the longest-serving Senate Republican leader in American history, unanimously elected to lead the conference 8 times since 2006. From 2015 to 2021, Leader McConnell served as the Senate Majority Leader. He is only the second Kentuckian to ever be Majority Leader of the U.S. Senate. In 2015 and 2019, Time magazine named Leader McConnell one of the 100 most influential people in the world. First elected to the Senate in 1984, Leader McConnell is Kentucky's longest-serving senator. He made history that year as the only Republican challenger in the country to defeat an incumbent Democrat and as the first Republican to win a statewide Kentucky race since 1968. On November 3, 2020, he was elected to a record 7th term, winning 117 of the Commonwealth's 120 counties. Before his election to the Senate, he served as Judge Executive of Jefferson County from 1978 until he commenced his Senate term on January 3, 1985. Leader McConnell currently serves as a senior member of the Appropriations, Agriculture, and Rules Committees. He is the proud father of 3 daughters. Leader McConnell is married to Secretary Elaine L. Chao, the 18th U.S. Secretary of Transportation. Previously, Secretary Chao served for 8 years as President George W. Bush's Secretary of Labor. She is also a former president of the United Way of America and director of the Peace Corps. We particularly want to thank Leader McConnell for his critical support for the IIJA. Please join me in welcoming our Senator, Mitch McConnell. Thank you so much. Yeah, appreciate you being here.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here. In listening to that rather long introduction, I noticed once again that I've been both the majority leader and the minority leader. By the way, it's better being majority leader. But it doesn't mean in the United States Senate that the minority doesn't have a voice. And you watched the big debate this week over the filibuster. The definition of the filibuster is that on most things the Senate does, it requires more than a simple majority to do it. For those of you who are not steeped in American history, the prediction from the very beginning, Washington, according to legend, was asked when he presided over the Constitutional Convention, what do you think the Senate's going to be like? And according to legend, he said it was going to be like the saucer under the teacup. The tea was going to kind of slosh out of the cup down to the saucer and cool off. So the Senate on purpose was designed to apply the brakes when the brakes were needed, or to force compromise when it was appropriate. And we've had a big back and forth over that the last few years. The previous president, as presidents frequently do when they have a majority of their party in the Senate, tweeted periodically about the need to change the rules of the Senate, of course, to provide a short-term opportunity for advantage. I always had a one-word answer, no, which generally subjected me to a lot of unpleasant tweets. So I tell you that story only to make the point that impatient majorities are frequently tempted to try to break the Senate in order to achieve short-term advantage. And that's what we had on full display this past week. Fortunately, even though many Democrats who, when the previous president was in office, were anxious to defend the filibuster, all of a sudden lost their zeal for it and flipped their positions. But we had a pretty narrow victory, but 2 Democrats stood up for the Senate as an institution. And the reason I tell you that story, it leads into infrastructure. The notion that you can't do things on a bipartisan basis because of the supermajority threshold is simply not true. Never has been true. What it does do is sort out the things that you can't reach a significant agreement on and separate them out from the things that are so partisan that they simply don't happen. And, you know, I've been in the Senate a while, and I think most of the things that didn't happen shouldn't happen, because you don't get enough broad support to achieve a lasting outcome. And the reason I mention a lasting outcome, if the Senate operated at a simple majority like the House, every time the power shifted, you'd be undoing what the previous people did. So this makes it almost impossible to get into a flip-flop back and forth unless one side has just a huge majority, and that happens occasionally. So, fast forwarding to infrastructure, something that you all have been visiting me about for years and hinting around about things that were politically really challenging, like gas tax increases. We found ourselves this year in a position to finally do something about infrastructure. And my feeling was that the past 2 administrations, by the way, wanted to do something about infrastructure. My wife, as you know, was Secretary of Transportation during the previous administration. They wanted to do something about infrastructure. We could never find the sweet spot to finally come together. But that illustrates that the minority party in the Senate, when you've got a subject that needs to be addressed, 75% of Americans felt we needed to do some serious upgrading to our infrastructure. That brought us together, and I facilitated an internal group in the Senate by encouraging them to go forward, of Democrats and Republicans who worked very hard, who then got the attention of President Biden, who decided maybe that was something he ought to be a part of. And it led to 68 or 69 votes in the Senate going over to the House. It ended up over there, as you notice, being held hostage to other things that the House majority wanted to do. But finally, the pressure was such that it passed exactly the way the Senate sent it over, exactly the way we wrote it in the Senate, took up by the House, sent to the President. There was no conference, no House action on it other than simply accepting what the Senate sent them. You're all familiar with what it means to Kentucky. It's a big deal for us. Regretfully, I was the only Republican in the Kentucky delegation who voted for it because it became, in my view, excuse me, needlessly politicized over in the House. And so you ended up having very few House Republicans. Could I have some water? Very few House Republicans who voted for it. But now your job is to spend that $5 billion we're going to have over the next 5 years wisely, and I'm sure the state will do that. It may finally open up the opportunities to go forward with the I-69 bridge and the Brent Smith bridge in ways that are less onerous than might have been envisioned earlier. And I'm pretty excited about it. You know, when you have divided government, we don't have divided government on paper, but we have a 50-50 Senate and about a 3 or 4 seat majority in the House. That's close to divided government. When the American people makes the government that close, I think what they're saying is, we know you're going to have trouble passing each other's agenda, but why don't you look for the things you can agree on and do those? And I think this is a classic example of looking for the things that there was enough agreement on to go forward. So I hope it's a good role model for our Democratic friends who, in my view, didn't get a mandate to turn America into Bernie Sanders' vision of what we ought to be. And the administration, I think, signed up with the Sanders agenda at the beginning of the year, pursued it aggressively, and it ground to a halt at the end of the year because they ended up not being able to sell it to their own people, and they were trying to do it one party only through a process called reconciliation. And reconciliation is not inappropriate. You can do it if you can get all your players together. And as you saw, several Democrats gagged at the end of the year over adding on top of what we'd already done another arguably $4 to $5 trillion in tax increases and new spending programs. So it'll be interesting to see going into the new year whether the administration, which by all indications is in serious trouble. If you look at the president's approval rating, according to some polls down in the 30s, that drains your ability to accomplish things and increases the number of people of your party who retire. And I think the current number in the House is 28 Democrats retiring in anticipation of a very bad election this fall. So I think the president's advisors are obviously thinking, you know, how do we turn this around? I don't think, I'm not the president's advisor, but I don't think the way to turn this around is to keep trying to do the same old thing. I think if I were in the president's position, I'd be looking for those things, maybe like infrastructure, that you can get bipartisan buy-in and become the moderate I said I was going to be when I ran. With the exception, the infrastructure bill had been few signs of moderation this whole year, and I think it has not ended well for the administration. The one thing they were able to jam through back in March on a thoroughly partisan basis produced the wave of inflation that we have right now. That was the roughly $2 trillion so-called rescue plan, allegedly about COVID, but was only 9% for health care, and all the rest of it was a grab bag of other items. Now, I'm sure Jim Gray and the officials over in Frankfurt and everybody in Frankfurt is excited about this avalanche of money that came down as a result of this March bill. Again, passed on a solely party line vote that has a wave of funding descending on every state in America. There's not a state in America that isn't more flush now than they've ever been in history as a result of borrowed money that we sent down back in March. I don't think doing more of that is a good idea, and I think that's one of the reasons the so-called Build Back Better, the second measure, stalled at the end of last year, because I think the feeling was maybe we need to quit borrowing and quit spending. Infrastructure, on the other hand, if not totally paid for, was largely, credibly paid for. Largely, credibly paid for. And is something there was broad bipartisan support for throughout the country. And so I'm proud of my vote. I took a little heat for it from somebody who used to be president, but I'm proud of my vote. I think it was the right thing to do for America and the right thing to do for the country. So I'd be happy to take a couple of questions if there are any. Did Secretary Gray lay out how he's going to spend all this money? Good. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I wish you all well, and to those of you who may end up doing business out of all of this, spend it wisely.